My dad and my granddad both were blacksmiths. As a kid, I was always making things. But it was in my blood. I visited my father in 1920. I was 10 years old. He lived in Eldale, Colorado. Had a blacksmith shop there. I guess you could say that's the first time I had anything to do with blacksmithing. The plans kind of grew. In fact, I designed a square house originally. My wife, Elizabeth, suggested I build a round house. I designed a square house, and there's also a garage out here with had a cupola on it like this. If they were square. And she come up with this idea of me building a round house. I took the design in the bedroom as a model for this roundhouse. It's a lantern that I built in Lafayette.
He didn't go back to the styles of his youth, let's say, which would have been a European style house. He chose a round house. And the house itself was a collaborative development between Elizabeth, his wife Elizabeth, and himself. And Elizabeth came from an arts background also. She got her degree in botany at Cal, but she then, when Carl met her, she was attending the College of Arts and Crafts. And he had made a series of lamps that are probably some of the finest examples of his style of work. They're these small elements, repetitive elements, an assembly, spectacular little things, and one of them is a circular lamp. That lamp was the design, the starting of the design development for the house.
Using the stone to create the walls, and then the beams hung off of that, and the chimney is the carrier of the beams, and the central post. The way the rooms are arranged, and the bedroom and the bathroom and the heater room and the storage room off the kitchen, the way he sort of segmented out part of the circle but kept things being round.
He didn't do anything traditional. It was a good idea. It was a different idea. He liked that. He didn't want to do a traditional type of house.
I first went to the county to get permission to build this house. They said we'd give you 6 months. And I got permission for them to bring a trailer on the property right out there between the shop and the house. After 6 months, I went back to him again and told him I still haven't got much done on the house. Could I give me another extension? Well, they did grant me that extension.
We met Carl when the house was under construction, He was living in the Quonset hut, which has been his workshop. Actually, they were living in a trailer in addition to the Quonset hut. So we saw the evolution of the construction of the house. And to me, as a young architect just out of school, this was just a revelation.
That spider, I call it a spider up there. Probably the biggest job I ever had on the job. Getting that damn thing. I weighed over 300 pounds. I had a tripod going up this, right in the middle of the house, and in fact I found my plumb bob right down the middle of the chimney. Took all my measurements for that plumb bob. And that spider there, as I said, it weighed over 300 pounds. I had a block and tackle hooked to that tripod, and I would sit in the standing position and sit down. It raised that maybe an inch or so, and eventually I got the darn thing up there. The third time I went back to the planning commission, there happened to be an architect on the planning commission. I brought a bunch of photographs of my progress on the house, and they gave me a permission to go ahead because of this architect seeing my photographs. But after that, I wasn't about to go back to the planning commission. The walls, I wanted them to be slant in, and they said you had to have a minimum of 7 inches of concrete. These concrete, they're just a veneer, and it has concrete poured down the middle. The inside is straight, the outside is tapered. You had, it looked like a bird cage with rebar every 18 inches, both vertically and horizontally. And when I laid the rock in there, I popped them up to the rebar and welded a little piece of metal there to keep them up next to the form, both inside and outside. Then I poured the concrete in there. And I got that done. I raised it up 2 foot and poured another layer in, and it's continued on up to the top. They're 7 foot high. You go up here near Glen Ellen. It was a rock quarry. But they had this rock there that you call it the Sonoma candy stick rock. It's a limestone. It's very similar to your Arizona flagstone. It splits very much like flagstone does.
I can't imagine in Sonoma County that there are 10 houses that were built by craftsmen that built every little bit themselves, and everything in it, every single thing in it has some creative quality to it.
You look at an area and you have to keep looking deeper and deeper and deeper, and it's still you find the guy had intention at every level. Can't miss the fireplace. I got to see it kind of come together, and when he put the final copper repoussé on that, it was just amazing.
Every door pull on every cabinet he made himself. All those little metal ones are different. Every door was built by him. The door hardware, and every one of them's a little bit different.
The glass, I put an ad in the paper. I'll take all your used glass. And I got all this glass from places like the neighborhood. A place in Oakland on Market Street that had, gobs of glass. And he had this glass, they call it seedy glass. It looks like a homemade glass, but it's not. It's just a seedy glass. It comes in this clear color and it comes in this amber color that's in the door. If you've ever been to Europe, there's a lot of monasteries that they frame in the windows and they use carved stone. That's where I got the inspiration from. This is made up, I modeled them in clay, made a pattern of it, and cast them in concrete.
My first impression of Carl was a very big man, very strong man, very inventive, ingenious man who had created this beautiful shape that he was making into a home for he and his wife, Elizabeth. He at that point was making the windows, which are the focal element as you walk into the house. And he was, not only was he making the metal, wonderful soft shaped arch and all of the wonderful sort of freeform, not cobweb-like linear connections, but more organic. But he was also planning to do all of the installation of all the glass, and he had wine bottles, and he encouraged us to save wine bottles because he somehow was going to use wine bottles in the doors and for light fixtures. And I really thought, this is one of the most inventive people that I've met in my whole life.
I did a job for the Christian Brothers Winery. Brother Timothy is his name. And when I got started on this, I could see I wasn't going to get friends of mine drinking enough champagne to get bottles of this. So he said, you go to the San Francisco scavenger department and they save them in cases down there.
I've never gone into that house that I haven't discovered something that I didn't see before. It is, like I say, it's a symmetry through scale thing of the deeper you want to go into it, the deeper you'll find that Carl was there and making decisions about how things should be. I mean, if you want to talk about another element of Carl's design is a certain sensuality. The randy sense of fun that the man has, the toilet paper holder. And I remember Robert Owing's wife at one time going, oh, you boys, he made a boys' bathroom. And I said, well, I don't know. Did you look at the drain pipe for the toilet? It's about as out there as the toilet paper holder.
He created probably one of the most unique bathtubs in the world for Elizabeth as a gift. It was a birthday gift, probably a year or two after they actually were living in the house. They lived very, very simply, and actually they almost camped out for so long that it was a luxury to have a bathtub. This is also Carl's inventiveness. He worked with materials he'd never worked with before. He worked with, I'm not sure if it was concrete but he molded and polished and embedded with pebbles and polished again and waxed, and finally it was this beautiful bathtub.
You have to always remember that the house was a partnership with Carl and Elizabeth. And it's difficult to see it in the house as much in the house now, but the landscaping also is a big part of both of them. Elizabeth's background in botany and that had a lot to do with it, but it has the same detail and feel to it that makes that house work correctly and is a really important part of it.
Elizabeth was a great influence on Carl, and I think still to this day you see the elements of bringing the outside in, of the landscaping being part of the architecture. And these are elements I feel very strongly about, that we live in an environment where we can appreciate and enjoy the outdoors, and the garden is equally as important as the interior spaces.
Carl was a metalsmith. Elizabeth was a horticulturist. And he got as much pleasure out of the gardens and the grounds as he did from the house itself. And to him there was no distinction, but they were a balance. And equally as important to the house were the things that that were growing around it, and Elizabeth's creations. Carl was a great artist, on top of being a good blacksmith. Carl always brought that artistic legitimacy. Carl was a place where you could go and talk about design as opposed to technique.
Anytime anybody comes to California and calls me up and says, I'm in the Bay Area, what should I see? I always say that in my opinion the most important thing to see is Carl Jennings' house. It is an incredible piece of craft work.